There's a guy who probably saved World War II, and you've never heard his name. While generals were planning battles and soldiers were fighting on the front lines, this one civilian figured out how to build a massive cargo ship in just 4 days. 4 days. The Navy said it was impossible. Every shipbuilding expert in America laughed at him, and yet he did it anyway. This is the story of Henry Kaiser, the man who broke every rule in the book and changed the entire war. Picture this. It's 1940, and Britain is starving. Not because there's no food in the world, but because German submarines are sinking every supply ship that tries to cross the Atlantic Ocean. These U-boats are hunting in packs, and they're incredibly good at what they do. Every week, dozens of ships go down, thousands of tons of food, weapons, fuel, all sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Britain is losing this battle, and America knows that if Britain falls, the Nazis will control all of Europe. The problem isn't just winning battles on land. The problem is getting supplies across the ocean faster than Germany can sink them. And that's where things get interesting, because the United States is about to meet a guy who doesn't care about how things have always been done. So here's the situation in 1940 and 1941. The United States isn't even in the war yet, but President Roosevelt knows they need to help Britain survive. He creates something called the Lend-Lease program, which basically means America will send supplies to Britain and other allies. Sounds simple, right? Just build ships and send stuff. But there's a massive problem. Building ships the traditional way takes time, a lot of time. We're talking about a year, sometimes even longer, to build one cargo ship. The math doesn't work. If it takes a year to build a ship and German submarines can sink that ship in minutes, you're never going to win. You're just feeding ships to the U-boats. American shipyards are already working as fast as they can, but they're using methods that haven't changed in decades. Everything is custom. Every ship is built by hand, piece by piece, by skilled craftsmen who have spent years learning their trade. These welders and riveters and shipbuilders are masters at what they do, but there just aren't enough of them. And training new ones takes years. The Navy does the math and realizes they're in trouble. They need hundreds of ships, maybe thousands, and they need them fast. But how do you build ships faster without sacrificing quality? How do you create a shipyard workforce when all your experienced workers are already busy? This is the crisis. And most people think there's no solution. Enter Henry Kaiser. Now, Kaiser is not a shipbuilder. He's never built a ship in his entire life. He's a construction guy. He built roads, dams, bridges. He was part of the team that built the Hoover Dam, which was one of the biggest construction projects in American history. Kaiser's whole thing is solving impossible problems. He looks at projects that everyone says can't be done, and he finds a way to do them. He's aggressive, he's confident, and he doesn't care about tradition. When the government starts looking for people to build cargo ships, Kaiser raises his hand, and the Navy looks at him like he's crazy. This guy wants to build ships, and he's never built a ship before? But Roosevelt likes Kaiser. He likes people who think big and move fast, so Kaiser gets a contract. Now here's where Kaiser does something genius. He looks at how ships are being built, and he immediately sees the problem. Traditional shipbuilding is like building a custom house. Every single part is made to fit that specific ship. Nothing is standardized. Every rivet, every plate of steel, every pipe and wire, it all has to be measured and cut and fitted by hand. It's slow, it's expensive, and it requires workers with years of experience. Kaiser thinks, why are we doing it this way? He comes from the construction world, where you use standardized parts. You don't custom make every brick and every beam. You mass-produce components and then assemble them. So Kaiser decides to do something radical. He's going to build ships the way Ford builds cars. Assembly line production. The Navy is skeptical. Ships aren't cars. They're huge, complex machines that have to survive storms and waves and carry thousands of tons of cargo. You can't just slap them together. But Kaiser doesn't care what the Navy thinks. He starts designing a ship called the Liberty Ship. It's a simple cargo vessel, nothing fancy, but it's designed from the ground up to be mass-produced. Every part is standardized. The hull is built in sections, called modules, and these modules are built separately and then welded together. This is a huge deal, because it means you can have different teams working on different modules at the same time, instead of everyone waiting for the previous step to be finished. Kaiser also makes another controversial decision. He's going to use welding instead of riveting. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, but in the shipbuilding world, it's revolutionary. Riveting is the traditional method. You heat up metal rivets and hammer them into place to hold steel plates together. It's strong, it's proven, but it's slow, and it requires a lot of skill. Welding is faster. You just melt the metal together. But a lot of old-school shipbuilders don't trust it. They think welded ships are weaker, that they'll crack under pressure. Kaiser looks at the data and says, welding is fine, we're using it. But here's the really clever part. Kaiser knows that he doesn't have enough skilled shipbuilders, so he designs the whole process so that unskilled workers can do most of the job. He breaks down every task into simple, repetitive steps. You don't need to know how to build an entire ship. You just need to know how to weld this one seam or bolt these two pieces together. He sets up massive training programs. People who have never set foot in a shipyard before, farmers, teachers, women who have never worked in heavy industry, they all get a few weeks of training and then they're put to work. Kaiser is building ships with people who 6 months ago didn't know what a welding torch was. And he doesn't just build one shipyard, he builds several. On the West Coast, he opens massive facilities in Richmond, California. These aren't traditional shipyards with a few slipways. These are industrial complexes with dozens of building berths, giant cranes, prefabrication shops. It's like a factory, but the product is a 10,000-ton ship. Kaiser brings in efficiency experts. He studies every step of the process and figures out how to shave off time. He uses prefabrication like crazy. Instead of building the whole ship on the slipway, they build huge sections in warehouses, complete with piping and wiring and equipment already installed, and then they lift these sections with cranes and weld them together. It's like building with Lego blocks, but each block weighs tons. The first Liberty ship takes about 230 days to build. That's already pretty good, much faster than traditional methods. But Kaiser isn't satisfied. He keeps refining the process. He figures out better ways to organize the workflow. He adds more prefabrication. He trains workers to be more efficient, and the construction time starts dropping. 200 days, 150 days, 100 days. The Navy is watching this with amazement. These ships are actually getting built faster and faster, but Kaiser still isn't done. He wants to prove a point. He wants to show the world what's possible when you throw out the old rules. In November 1942, Kaiser's Richmond shipyard decides to do something crazy. They're going to build a Liberty ship from start to finish as fast as physically possible. This is a publicity stunt, but it's also a demonstration of what their system can do. The ship is called the Robert E. Peary. They start with a bare slipway on November 12th. Every worker in the yard knows this is a special build. They've been preparing for weeks, pre-building as many modules as possible, organizing every tool and piece of equipment, planning every step down to the minute. When the clock starts, it is like watching a perfectly choreographed dance. Cranes are lifting massive hull sections into place. Welders are swarming over every joint. Electricians are running wiring. Pipe fitters are installing systems. There's no wasted movement. Everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when. Day 1, the keel is laid and the bottom sections of the hull are in place. Day 2, the sides are going up. Day 3, the deck is being installed. Day 4, they're adding the superstructure and the engines. This is insane. A ship that would normally take 6 months to build is taking shape in less than a week. The workers are going around the clock in shifts. Nobody wants to be the person who slows this down. On November 15th, just 4 days and 15 hours after they started, the Robert E. Peary is complete, not just assembled, but complete, ready to launch, ready to sail. They've built a fully functional cargo ship in less time than it takes most people to plan a vacation. The shipyard workers are exhausted, but they're celebrating. They've just done something that every expert said was impossible. News of this spreads across the country. 4 days. The Navy is stunned. The British are amazed. Even the Germans hear about it and they can't believe it. Hitler's U-boat commanders are probably sitting in their submarines thinking, wait, they can build ships faster than we can sink them? This changes everything. Because suddenly, the math of the Battle of the Atlantic is different. Germany can sink a dozen ships and America can replace them in a month. The Liberty ship program becomes one of the most successful industrial projects in history. By the end of the war, Kaiser's shipyards and others using his methods have built over 2,700 Liberty ships. That's more tonnage than the entire Japanese merchant fleet. These ships carry the tanks and trucks and food and fuel that allow the Allies to invade North Africa, then Italy, then France. Without Liberty ships, D-Day doesn't happen. Without Liberty ships, the Soviet Union probably can't hold off Germany because a huge amount of American aid is flowing to Russia through these cargo vessels. But the Robert E. Peary record isn't just about speed. It's about what's possible when you're willing to rethink everything. Kaiser looked at an industry that had been doing things the same way for generations and said, Why does it have to take a year to build a ship? Why do we need highly skilled craftsmen for every job? Why can't we use mass production? And he proved that the old way wasn't the only way. Now, it's worth mentioning that the 4-day ship was a special case. Most Liberty ships didn't get built that fast. The average construction time was more like 40 to 50 days, which is still incredibly impressive. And there were some problems with the early Liberty ships. Some of them developed cracks in their hulls, especially in cold water. It turned out that welding, while faster, did have some issues that the old-timers had warned about. But Kaiser and his engineers figured out solutions. They improved the steel quality. They changed the welding techniques. They added reinforcements in critical areas. By the middle of the war, Liberty ships were reliable workhorses. Kaiser himself became a national hero. He was on the cover of magazines. Roosevelt called him one of the most important men in America. After the war, Kaiser took his mass production genius and applied it to other industries. He started building cars, trying to compete with the big Detroit automakers. That didn't work out so well. The Kaiser Car Company eventually failed, but he had success in other areas. He built hospitals, founded a health insurance company that still exists today, and continued working on huge construction projects. But his greatest achievement was always the Liberty ships. He proved that innovation isn't just about inventing new technology. Sometimes it's about taking existing technology and using it in a completely different way. The tools Kaiser used, welding, cranes, standardized parts, none of that was new. But putting it all together in a shipyard was revolutionary. Let's talk about the impact on the workers too, because this is a really important part of the story. Kaiser's shipyards employed tens of thousands of people, and many of them were people who had never had opportunities like this before. Women made up a huge part of the workforce. We've all heard of Rosie the Riveter, right? That image of a woman in work clothes flexing her arm? A lot of the real Rosies worked in Kaiser's shipyards. They were welders, crane operators, painters, electricians. They did every job that men did, and they did it just as well. For a lot of these women, this was the first time they'd earned good money and had real economic independence. Kaiser also hired African Americans in large numbers at a time when a lot of industries were still segregated. His shipyards weren't perfect, there was still discrimination and inequality, but they were more integrated than most workplaces in the 1940s America. The city of Richmond, California, where Kaiser built his biggest shipyards, completely transformed during the war. Before Kaiser arrived, Richmond was a small town with about 23,000 people. By 1943, the population had exploded to over 100,000. Workers poured in from all over the country looking for jobs. Kaiser built housing for them, entire neighborhoods of temporary homes. He built schools and daycare centers so that mothers could work in the shipyards. He even built hospitals and medical clinics. Kaiser understood that if you want people to work efficiently, you need to take care of their basic needs. You can't expect someone to build ships if they're worried about where their kids are or whether they can see a doctor. This holistic approach to industrial production was ahead of its time. Henry Kaiser took an industry that hadn't changed in generations and completely reinvented it. He used mass production, standardized parts, and unskilled labor to build ships faster than anyone thought possible. The Liberty Ship program produced over 2,700 vessels and helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. Kaiser's methods influenced not just shipbuilding, but housing construction and healthcare. His story proves that the biggest breakthroughs often come from outsiders who aren't bound by traditional thinking. The Liberty ships won World War II as much as any weapon did. They kept the supply lines open and gave the Allies the advantage they needed to win. Check out the next video to see more untold stories from World War II.